Hey DJ Tech Tools, in today's episode we're going to talk about advanced 4-deck mixing. Now as you probably know, Traktor Pro and a lot of other DJ software has 4 decks in it. But really these decks are rarely used because in reality mixing 4 songs on top of each other rarely sounds good, usually sounds like audio soup. I personally almost always use 2 decks in my live sets. But with a few advanced techniques, you can use 4 decks in some really cool and powerful ways. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to layer your cue points with additional sounds from the bottom decks to thicken up your cue points and make cue point juggling sound amazing. Check out this demo to see what it sounds like, and then after the break, we'll get in and show you how it works. All right, so in the left deck, I've got a beat running. In the right deck, I've got some cue points. So you can do a little bit of cue point juggling. And this sounds pretty damn good. But if we want to thicken it up a little bit, wouldn't it be cool to drop some sounds like some kicks or some snares or some splashes over the cue points? So I came up with this idea recently, and I want to share it with you. Here in Traktor Pro, I've taken decks C and D and turned them into sample decks. And I've combined a single cue point hit with a single sample hit. So you'll see that when I strike that cue point, we can listen to it if we turn this down, it not only strikes the cue point, but also plays this sample at the same time. Same with number 2, number 3, number 4, and then I've gone ahead and associated these samples with 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, you wouldn't want to always have the sample tied directly to the cue point, so I came up with an idea where I could map all of the volumes of all the samples to one fader, and that's this guy here. So you'll see, as I move the fader, the sample volumes go down, so you can kind of work it in. Pretty expressive. And then I've got one additional trick that I put in there that's kind of cool too. And that is when you're playing over a beat, if you drop not only a big beefy sample, but also a kick, there's not a whole lot of room in the audio spectrum for those sounds. So if you want to have them heard and not just kind of pile audio on top of audio, then you're going to need to make room. And so I did that by using the second half of this super fader. This is the new MIDI Fighter Pro, one of the new 4 models of the MIDI Fighter Pro series, and each model is equipped with super faders. So on the full range of the fader, I'm basically turning up the sample volume, and in the second half of the range, you'll see it kicks in right here, I'm going to start to turn down the volume of deck A. So it would sound something like this. So all the way down, we're barely hearing deck A, and we're hearing all of the sample, and I can gently do a blend between them. So it works pretty well. It's always really important to remember when you're mixing that you can't just dump audio on top of audio on top of audio. It's going to end up being a big sonic mess, so you've got to make room. Another way you could do this would be to map that second part of the fader range to maybe the filter, so it sweeps out the low end or the high end of the track that's playing, giving you room and allowing the audience to hear what you're doing with your cue point juggling. So you're probably thinking, well, that's great, but how do I actually do it? How in the world am I going to implement that? Well, this feature is going to be included in the mapping for this particular MIDI Fighter Pro right here. It's been designed specifically for cue point juggling and getting really crazy and actually playing decks like instruments, so you can become almost like an instrumentalist with your DJ software. You can also, of course, do this yourself. It's pretty simple, and I'd like to jump into the software and show you. Okay, so we're going to click into Preferences here, and then we're going to go into Control Manager. I've got a special mapping here with all these functions just so I can test and tweak them without looking at my other functions. Now, the first thing we want to do is go ahead and trigger that sample at the same time as a cue point. That's pretty simple. It's just a sample trigger command. You can load that by going add in, sample deck, and then sample trigger. You, of course, assign it to the particular slot you want. In this case, this would be slot probably 1, deck 4, slot 1. You want to set that to hold. Now, just triggering it isn't enough. You actually need to add one additional command to have it work the way I have it, where when you hit a cue point, even if you don't hold down the cue point or the cue point doesn't continue to play, the sample plays its full length. To do that, you need to add a slot start-stop command. So basically, I've got one button sending out 2 messages connected to 2 things. And those 2 things combined to one will go ahead and trigger a sample in addition to a cue point. Pretty sweet. All right, now for the sample deck volume, it's pretty simple. There's, of course, a slot volume that you can assign, and I've got all 8 slots assigned to 1 CC. Now, as I mentioned, this fader actually sends out 2 CCs and 2 notes. There's a note at the bottom, a note at the top, and 2 CCs in the range. And so I've got that second CC mapped here to volume fader A. Now, you could make this flexible so you can move around and work with different decks. I personally like to juggle and do all this on my right hand, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of always remember that my juggling happens over here and to have these hard-coded elements in the mapping. So turn down volume fader A while you bring up the samples in deck B, C, and D. So there you have it. There's just one advanced technique on how you can use 4 decks in Traktor or any DJ software in a really, really cool way. In future episodes of this particular series, we're going to go into even more creative ways of using 4 decks in powerful, totally original ways that go way beyond just mixing 4 tracks. So check out this demo. I'll do a little mix for you, and be sure to check us out on the web at djtechtools.com.